When developing a video game, it's inevitable that some lines of voice dialogue, gameplay mechanics, or dummy text for testing purposes are left on the cutting room floor. Since outright deleting these from the game might break other parts of the code, these are often left on the disc, despite being unused. Persona 4 has quite a lot of this data, and that's what we're going to be covering today. This video will likely be in multiple parts given the sheer amount of content, and I'll be covering both the original PS2 version and Persona 4 Golden. Most of the unused content I'll be discussing in this video comes from thecuttingroomfloor.net, as well as a bit of original research I did looking through various YouTube videos of people who've hacked the game for unused skills and events. Also, before we start, just a fair warning that if you have not played Persona 4 yet, there will be spoilers in this video. Let's get right to it. We'll begin with unused content related to social links, because that's where the elephant in the room that I want to start with is. Many of the social links have unused voice clips associated with them. To clarify, all of these lines exist in both Japanese and English. My guess is the English voice actors were just given the full list of lines and told to dub everything. They wouldn't have known which lines were used and which weren't. And every Japanese line would need a dubbed counterpart, otherwise the game might break down. In most of these cases, the unused social link lines aren't that interesting. They're just alternative takes on lines from the rank 9 and 10 conversations.
Being yourself ain't about shutting out the parts you don't like. It's about letting the real kanji shine through, no matter what's happening. I'll do what I want my own way. That's what it's about. I started to think like that after meeting you and the other guys. Man, this is crazy, huh?
But the magician's social link, Yosuke Hanamura, has a few unused voice clips with implications.
I like you. I never knew I had such heat inside. Don't make me say stuff like that. Don't go.
In case you're thinking that's ambiguous, the Japanese equivalent of the I like you line is...
俺、お前が好きだ。
This terminology nearly always means liking somebody romantically. Before I go on, I just want to stress something. This is all that is unused in Yosuke's social link. There is no cut text, and the link doesn't have a proper description for reverse and break states like most romances in this game do. But these lines, combined with Yosuke having a flag that determines whether you get to hug him at rank 8, which is something that generally only romantic social links do, heavily implies that Yosuke was going to be a romance option at one point in development. Which would explain a lot of the subtext Yosuke shows towards the protagonist in the main story and especially the anime. Just bear in mind, these are the only aspects of substantial unused content for this social link. I've seen several mods that make him a romance option, but remember that any dialogue in those mods would have to be fan-made. The second social link with interesting unused voice clips is Margaret, the Empress social link. The reason why this is interesting is that in the final game, her social link doesn't have voice clips at all, besides the usual welcome to the Velvet Room. I'm not sure why they decided to remove the typical social link voice grunting for Margaret specifically, but she has over 70 lines of voice dialogue for her social link and all of them go unused.
Welcome. What brings you here? I don't mind. I see. This is somewhat embarrassing. Thank you. I'm sorry. I apologize. Yes. No. I don't know.
And now a couple of interesting ones.
What a lovely thought. It makes me want to kill you. How disappointing, you dog. You have nothing worth living for. Oh, if you wanted to die, you could have just asked.
Finally, in terms of the ones I find interesting at least, Nanako and Dojima each have one unused voice clip. I'm not sure what rank these would have played in.
I'm going to work hard at helping out, for Mom's sake.
Well, Nanako isn't afraid of me. She's just like her mother.
In addition to unused voice clips, several social links have unused text as well. Chie has an alternative rank 3 and rank 9 conversation in the game's data. Specifically, the alternate rank 3 is actually an alternate rank 3. It's a different version of the rank 3 that plays after Nanako has been kidnapped. Rank 9 is mostly the same, just with slightly different lines, but it does have one line at the end that implies this rank might have originally been doable on rainy days. There are also 2 strings inside the file for the social link status screen that are gasoline stand worker and social link explanation message gasoline stand dummy, along with internal files labeled gasoline stand employee social rank X dummy. There's nothing else in the game pertaining to this, but it's likely that that offer of a part-time job by the gasoline attendant at the start of the game might have led to an actual social link at one point in development. I wonder if this is cut because it may have hinted at spoilers too strongly if it was an actual social link, but that might have been interesting, honestly. Regardless, Golden did kind of end up giving us an Izanami social link in the form of Marie. That's all for unused content from the social links themselves, but there's some unused text that hints at scrapped social link mechanics. The most notable is that every social link in the game has text for its menu description if the link is reversed or broken. What's interesting is the vast majority of social links simply have descriptions like, "This social link should never reverse or break, if you see this, it's a bug." So they always intended for Persona 4's social links to be a lot kinder than P3's, where every link could reverse or break. The only social links that have unique dialogue for reversing or breaking are all of the romanceable social links. There's also unused dialogue for talking to certain party members in the dungeon while Yukiko or Chie are reversed. Interestingly, there's also a reverse dungeon dialogue for Yosuke. There's also unused dialogue for recovering from reverse for Chie, Yukiko, and Rise. The fact that most of this unused text is surrounding the romanceable girls implies that while they intended to heavily tone down the reverse and breakage system, they did intend to bring back Persona 3's jealousy mechanic if you romance multiple girls. In the final game, only Naoto and Ai's social links can reverse and only Ai's can break, but this is only caused by dialogue choices, not by cheating on them. In fact, in the final game, there's no punishment for cheating at all besides getting guilt-tripped on Valentine's Day. But there's one thing that I find really interesting about these unused menu descriptions. There is one social link besides the romance options that has unique reverse and break lines, and that is strength. There are messages like, "Your relationship with your sports buddies isn't going well, and you and your friends from the sports team seem to be drifting apart." This would imply that at one point in development, Ko and Daisuke's social links could reverse, and I'm guessing it would happen via dialogue choices too. There's a part later on in Daisuke's social link where he gets mad at Yu and Ko, and Ko goes through a bout of depression halfway through his social link, so perhaps if you were particularly insensitive at those points, you could have reversed the social link. There's one other large set of unused text lines that would hint at a scrapped social link mechanic. There are 2 instances in the game where you can go grocery shopping at Junes with Nanako and Dojima. In the final game, it's just you, but there's unused dialogue for any one of your social links except I think Hisano showing up here. This implies this was gonna function like the Koromaru walks in Persona 3, when a random social link would meet you and you'd get points with them. Every social link has 2 sets of lines for this, one for their summer outfits and one for winter outfits, including Naoto, even though by the time Naoto joins, everyone's gone back to winter outfits. Some people believe Naoto was supposed to join earlier in the game. There's some more unused content that might hint at that, but I'll get to that later. But while we're on the subject of social link mechanics, Teddy and the Fox both have dialogue for spend time sessions, even though in the final game, Teddy's social link is plot-based, and the fox doesn't need spend times, at least not in the conventional sense. Finally, some social link text that isn't technically unused, but due to the way the game is designed, you'll never be able to see it. The Judgment social link has a unique menu description for every individual rank, but it often ranks up multiple times during long stretches of cutscenes with no opportunity to access the menu in between. Here are the points at which Judgment ranks up. The ranks that I've marked in red are the ones that you can never view the descriptions of legitimately. And here are the descriptions for those ranks. And that's pretty much it for social links and social link related mechanics. Next, I'll cover unused content related to dungeon and battle gameplay. But the first one is actually outside the dungeon. In the final game, going to sleep early at night sometimes gives you a random dream about a social link, giving you points towards them. There's unused text that implies that originally, these dreams were supposed to give your equipped persona a random stat boost instead. Within the dungeons themselves, there's a lot of dialogue that's either fully unused or technically in the game but you just never have a chance to see it. For example, when you find party members inside a dungeon and talk to them, they give you dialogue based on what rank of their social link they're at, and if there's another party member present, they'll give an appropriate comment. Naoto has a comment in the game's data for Teddy's rank 5 social link dungeon conversation. However, you can never see this without hacking because Teddy ranks up to 6 the day after Naoto joins, and there's no opportunity to go to the dungeon in between. It's a shame because Naoto's response to this conversation is pretty hilarious. There's also the dialogue for talking to your party members at the entrance of each dungeon. Normally, there are several different variations on this dialogue, depending on if that dungeon's deadline is currently active, and if not, whether a different dungeon's deadline is active. Every dungeon also has entrance lines for when things are completely peaceful and no deadline is active, including Yomotsu Hirasaka, despite the fact that after you complete this dungeon, the game ends, so you have no opportunity to visit this place under peaceful circumstances. It's a shame because the lines for this are very bittersweet. In addition to plain text, there's also a lot of unused voice clips for dungeon exploration. The most notable of which is that Teddy has a full set of navigator lines referring to Naoto, or, well, in his case, Nao-chan. Just note that I'm using the voice clips from Dave Wittenberg's Teddy, not Sam Riegel's, but they sound almost exactly the same.
Don't give up, Nao-chan! Oh, Nao-chan came back! Nao-chan, they lowered your offense! Nao-chan's confused! Nao-chan's poisoned! Great moves, Nao-chan! 4 enemies defeated!
In the final game, you can't hear these lines without hacking, as by the time Naoto joins, Teddy is no longer a navigator. Some people think these lines imply that Naoto was originally planned to join earlier in the game, but I personally think these are just here to ensure the game doesn't crash if you hack her into the party while Teddy's still navigating. On the other hand though, every party member is assigned an internal ID number ranging from 0 to 9. 1 is the protagonist, 2 is Yosuke, and the rest go in order of the party members joining, except that Naoto is numbered 7 and Teddy is 9. So maybe Naoto was supposed to join earlier at one point in development. We're entering the realm of pure speculation on my part here, but it always felt a bit strange that Teddy's awakening happened during Risei's dungeon. Maybe at one point Teddy would have had his own dungeon. But even Risei has some unused navigation lines. These all refer to characters either feeling tired or being low on energy.
You okay, Senpai? Feeling tired? Oh no, Yukiko-senpai! You're out of energy! Oh no, Kanji! Are you out of energy?
Every party member also has some lines for mentioning being out of energy while they're outside of battle, much like they'll often pipe up about being on low health.
I'm all out of energy.
I'm all out of energy, sir.
tired.
I have no energy left. Why don't we go back?
Some people think this was evidence that Persona 3's tiredness mechanic was meant to come back, but I personally think these lines are meant to play when the characters are low on SP. It's not just the party that has unused voice clips though, many of the game's bosses do as well. Some of them are just more generic tough guy talk.
What's wrong? Scared?
But there are a few that are a bit more interesting. For example, Shadow Kanji has lines that seem to go with his Forbidden Murmur and Roar of Wrath attacks.
You know, I can be very gentle towards boys. Girls don't interest me, thank you.
And another line that would probably have played after you destroyed Nice Guy or Tough Guy.
My pal!
Yukiko also has an unused line that's supposed to play if she's deployed for the Kuni no Sagiri fight.
Let go of Nanako-chan.
I'm guessing that they cut this line because it doesn't really make sense. By the time the fight starts, Namatame has already let go of Nanako. Although the text box for this line actually says stay away from Nanako-chan, which makes more sense, but the line isn't used either way. While we're on the subject of the party's enemies, there are also many unused shadows in the game's data. If you played Persona 3, you might remember the Maya enemies, those slime shadows that forms the most basic type of enemies that you'd fight in Tartarus. Persona 4 shows you those in an early cutscene before debating you and having them turn into Hablares instead. The models for all of Persona 3's Maya shadows are in the game's data. However, they all have dummy stats and no skills. They do, however, have Daidara material drops that all have fully functional menu descriptions. There are also a few unused Basalt-type shadows that do have full stats and elemental affinities coded in, implying that these were meant to be enemies in the game. The Daidara drops from these Basalt also have fully functional sell prices. There are also a few unused Daidara drops that don't have enemies corresponding to them. These refer to an enemy type called Messenger. Divine Messenger, Chivalrous Messenger, Dream Messenger, etc. These might have looked angelic in some way, but that's really the best I can guess about them. In terms of other battle mechanics, we also have some silly debug text related to shuffle time. So in the final game, you can pick Arcana cards that all have various effects. Some of these effects can fail. For example, the Magician card normally upgrades skills, but if your persona has no skills that can be upgraded, it will give a failure message. Similarly, the Emperor Arcana can fail if your equipped persona is at level 99. However, for the sake of the game not breaking down, every Arcana has its own failure message, even the ones that have no fail states. And the English localizers had a lot of fun with these. I'll just let them speak for themselves. Speaking of funny debug dialogue, Rise has unused battle text for prompting an all-out attack or initiating a follow-up attack. Obviously, Rise can't do either of these things, but I can actually picture these lines in Rise's voice, and I would pay good money to have Laura Bailey voice act these. Obviously, these only exist to prevent the game from crashing in case these situations happen somehow. And now the part that you've probably been waiting for, unused personas. This, unfortunately, isn't that interesting. At least not for Golden. In the vanilla PS2 version, Magatsu Izanagi did exist in the game's code as a persona of the Full Arcana. It had similar stats to Adachi's boss fight, but it had no skills. Hack a few skills onto it, and it was fully usable though. Again, this is moot in Golden because it became an actual persona of the Hunger Arcana. There are also 3 blank dummy persona slots that all use the portrait of Ongyorki and the 3D model of Slime. They work in Fusion as regular Fool cards, but other than that they have no data. Maybe there were just 4 additional personas planned to be in the game that were cut during development, leaving behind these blank, missing no personas, I guess. I'm going to engage in a bit of speculation here. Assuming these numbers are hexadecimal values, and that all personas are stored in the game's list in the order they are in the compendium, which I kind of doubt. Sometimes video game data storage is illogical. And well, if I'm wrong, this whole theory falls apart. But in the compendium order, 43 would go in the Emperor Arcana right before Odin, 52 would be at the high end of the Hierophant Arcana near Koryu, and 180 and 181 would be personas at the very end of the compendium, because there are about 179 personas in the vanilla PS2 version, including Izanagi no Okami. But now we get to something I find a little more interesting: unused skills. Some of these, though, aren't actually unused. Every enemy-exclusive ability, such as Margaret's spells in the Super Boss fight, as well as the signature moves of the Shadow Bosses like Forbidden Murmur and Wind of Oblivion, are all usable and have fully functioning descriptions if hacked onto the protagonist. The one I find the most hilarious is Izanami's 1,000 Curses, because it's programmed to instantly kill anything, including bosses. Word of advice though, don't try it on Izanami herself.
You dare use my own spells against me, possibly?
Come on! Take this!
Yeah, so since both phases of her fight can only be ended via cutscenes, Izanami has no death state, so using this on her crashes the game. Other funny things are the fact that the waste money effect of panic status is considered a skill that you can use via hacking, as are all of the party members' follow-up attacks, and, well, Galactic Punt counts as a physical attack. Normally, Chie will never use it against enemies that are immune to or repel physical, but what if she could?
Guys, Chie-senpai's really hurt.
There are also a few flat-out unused skills among this list though, such as Golden Right, which deals medium physical damage with a chance of fear, Eternal White and Eternal Black, which seem to be stronger versions of God's Judgment and Hell's Judgment, individual spells to cure exhaustion and enervation, which do exist in some other SMT games, but here they decide to combine them both into Energy Shower, Judgment, which reduces the HP of all foes weak to either light or darkness to 1, and a name that might be familiar to fans of Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, Masakados, which nullifies all attacks but Almighty. This skill is technically in the game as the innate effect of the Omnipotent Orb accessory. There are also some unused passives that increase max HP and SP. I feel they more exist for debug purposes, but there's one category that I find a bit more interesting. HP Favor doubles your max HP but halves your max SP, and SP Favor does the opposites. Those could have been interesting on personas the protagonist could equip. There are also some unused accessories, including a default weapon for Teddy with a hilarious description, but the marksman's eyes and the sight beads I personally feel were, again, meant for debug purposes. The elemental bangles are interesting though, because I believe those were in Persona 3. That's mostly everything for unused dungeon and battle mechanics, but before we leave this section, one thing I want to show. Every time you fuse a persona, there's actually a piece of text that comes before the persona's fusion dialogue that you'll never get to see. I am a dummy message. Herfadurfadurf. I've saved unused graphics until now because, in my opinion, it's not that interesting. Just temporary placeholder portraits, early versions of the characters' portraits, portraits of some of the shadows without the yellow eyes for some reason, and some cut-in graphics that may have intended to have been used in a similar way to dialogue cut-ins in Persona 3 and 5. There are a couple of unused cut-ins of Kanji and Risei using their very early beta designs, though. Probably the coolest of these is an unused dungeon speech icon for the protagonist. Sadly, him being silent means we never get to see this. These next two aren't unused, but you can't get a good look at them without hacking the textures and viewing them in more detail. The first is that during the scene where Adachi arrests Risei's stalker, if you were to look at the texture on his police band, you'd notice that it uses early concept art of Adachi. Secondly, you know that green Matrix-style text in the background of battles in Naoto's dungeon? Well, you can't really view this at in-game resolution, but the text is actually readable. It comes from a French Huffington Post article about a Japanese agricultural minister who resigned. Notably, the text is not the entire article, they just took bits and pieces of it and pieced it together, so even if you can understand French, it's kind of illegible without the full context. Finally, the character dialogue portraits are actually a lot bigger than the ones you see in the game, but in order to see the full portrait, you have to ignore all alpha channels. Here's Yosuke's, where you can actually see a French phrase on his t-shirt, which apparently translates as, "You see I am made." A pair of sideways-facing glasses are hidden in the alpha channel of every Risei Navigator portrait. Your guess is as good as mine as to why these are here. In addition, pretty much the entire set of battle graphics for Persona 3 is on the Persona 4 disc, and in Golden, some graphics from Persona 3 Portable are also included. This leads me into unused music. The entire Persona 3 soundtrack is in Persona 4's files, not just the ones that you hear during the school trip. This includes some of Persona 3's unused music, such as the early version of Burn My Dread, this mysterious fanfare of unknown purpose, and strangely, the official remix of Deep Breath from the Burn My Dread Reincarnation album. This track is only found in the files of Persona 4, which implies that it was planned to play during the school trip, maybe?
Take a deep breath, deep breath, deep breath, deep breath. Let it go, let it out, let it go, let it out. Take a deep breath, deep breath, deep breath.
Anyway, I think the reason why all of this Persona 3 content exists in the game's files is that Persona 4 was built off of Persona 3's engine. Simple as that. It happens a lot with games. For example, Pokemon Emerald contains the entire Fire Red and Leaf Green soundtrack in its files. Actually, music wasn't the only leftover from Persona 3. Persona 3's opening movie is also in Persona 4's files. There's only one other unused movie in Persona 4, and this is a very, very early draft of Persona 4's end credits. Seriously, this is such an early draft, it's almost painful. The portraits aren't finalized, the personas are concept sketches, there's no music, and all of the parts where it's supposed to show cutscenes from the game, they just show the TV entrance with the text "Dummy Anime" written on it. What is interesting though is in these draft credits, the characters appear in a different order. In the final game, the party members appear in the order they join, except that Teddy comes after Naoto, which might be another implication that she was planned to join earlier. But the order in the draft credits is protagonist, Yukiko, Chie, Yosuke, Naoto, Risei, Kanji, and Teddy. This seems to be listing the characters in order of school grade, though not strictly in order of age. Finally, I want to discuss unused content that only appears in Persona 4 Golden. On top of the Persona 3 Portable leftovers, there are some other unused graphics that are only in this version. Some of them are early placeholder graphics for Risei's all-out attack help animation, including one that's kind of a silly drawing of her face, and a portrait of the Dojima family. Given its small size, yes, I am showing the actual size of this image, so when it's blown up it doesn't look very good. but it was probably intended as the texture for some kind of picture frame in the house. Unfortunately, this doesn't give us a very good look at Chisato Dojima, and I actually suspect she might be a stock photo. But hey, if you ever wanted to see a vague idea of what Dojima's wife looked like, this is the closest you'll get. But now to something a little bit more interesting. There was one major bonus feature within the TV listings that was only in the Japanese and Korean versions, but was cut from every other version of the game. Interviews with the Japanese voice actors of the main characters. These interviews use their own 3D models of the characters with TV faces of their real-life actors. And these models are still in the Western versions of the game, they're just not used for anything. I can actually understand why they decide to cut this, especially since the original Vita version of Golden didn't even have a Japanese voice option, so they would have spent a lot of time and effort translating and subtitling these interviews for voice actors you couldn't even hear in the game. And union issues might have prevented them from making an equivalent for the English voice actors. But I wonder if there's a mod that puts this back into the Steam version, or if anyone out there has found any footage of these interviews online. I'd actually be really interested to see them. Then there's some Golden exclusive debug text. Most of this isn't all that interesting, it's just more of the English localizers having fun with silly debug dialogue. There's also some dummy text for Fox Social Link ranks that imply that either rank 4 or 7 was going to be changed in Golden and require you to deliver a royal jelly. There's also some dummy text involving challenging the gatekeepers of various dungeons, and also text referring to an extra quest for defeating all of the gatekeepers. Whether or not this was the optional bosses at the end of each dungeon and the Margaret fight, or if they were planning on implementing a new set of extra bosses like Persona 3 Portable did, I'm not sure. As well as remnants of debug tools such as the ability to unlock or remove all quests, activate fishing for the Guardian, etc. But there is one slightly interesting thing here, and that's evidence of a nighttime Junes job, which is not in the final game. Hackers of the Steam version have found some events for a Junes job, but all of them are very unfinished and some of them even have Japanese text. So it's likely this didn't make it very far in development. But combing through footage of these unused events, the one that I found the most interesting was evidence that instead of going to Cafe Chagall to extract skill cards from personas, you would instead rent DVDs and watch them in your room. But this would explain why there's a video rental store in Okina that never gets used for anything. And it's probably the origin of the DVD rentals from Persona 5. And on a personal note, I think that having skill card extraction be a nighttime activity instead of using up your whole afternoon would have been much more convenient, especially later in Golden where you don't have much to do with your nights. And that covers pretty much all the unused content in Persona 4 and Golden, with one exception: cut dialogue from the main story. But that's gonna get its own video, so look forward to that in part 2 of Persona 4's unused content. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed this one. I love talking about unused content in games, and hopefully you found Persona 4's unused content just as interesting as I have. See you all next time.